Hi everyone, Simon here with a run through of Sandbox and business sim style games that I played throughout Steam Next Fest summer 2022. I downloaded and played the demos for varying lengths of time, some for 10 minutes, some for up to an hour, and here are my thoughts on the games as we go. And I'll tell you whether or not I enjoyed them and whether they stayed on my wishlist. The first game out the box is Brewmaster Beer Brewing Simulator, and it's a resounding no from me with this one. It follows an awful lot of bare bones style simulator games where you're plonked into an absolutely ginormous room to try and build out your own task as you go. But the problem with Brewmaster is that none of it is explained to you in any way, shape or form. The documentation was woolly at best and non-existent most of the time, but also the logic behind how things set up just didn't click with me in any way, shape or form. A lot of the different apparatus that you needed to put together to brew something required tubes to go in and out of various different places, but they didn't make sense, and I kept on getting stuck where I'd put a tube in like a tap to a pot or something, and then I needed something to come out of the pot into the next thing, and it just wasn't working, and so I got frustrated at the controls, frustrated at the logic, and it also seemed to be set out in a really cumbersome way. Add to that first-person controls that just felt like I was running around a very bare-bones Unity asset dump. And yeah, I just was totally unimpressed from the whole experience. So Brewmaster, a resounding no from me, and I have uninstalled it and removed it from my wishlist. The next game is a resounding yes, though, and it's called Spirittea. Spirittea is Studio Ghibli's Spirited Away the bathhouse section as a management game, which I absolutely love. You play as this character who can see spirits and opens up and tries to restore and renovate a disused and abandoned bathhouse. And how this works is it kind of forms into several parts of the game. You've got a wider town that you can engage with and talk with that feels very RPG and Stardew Valley-esque. But then when you get to the actual bathhouse stuff in the evening, this feels more like Diner Dash. So you've got various different tasks that you need to manage. So you need to clean the towels and make sure they're at the front desk for the spirits to pick up. Then if they pick up the towel, you'll then walk them to their location in the bathhouse. And this works very similar to a lot of like puzzle placement style games, because certain spirits belong to certain seasons and they don't like sitting next to other things, so you need to kind of arrange them in a way that means that they're happy, it doesn't affect their mood, but it can also boost the profits that they'll give you back. You can then feed them tea or give them snacks or entertain them, depending on whatever you've got going on in your establishment, and then once they're happy and clean, off and away they go. You can drop in various different bath fragrances or salts or flowers or petals or oils so that you can change the colour and make different scents happen. Again, catering to whoever you've dumped in the specific bath that you're treating. It worked really well, even though it's lots of separate articles all kind of put together. And I was super intrigued about the overall arching story of this game as well. So yeah, ticked all the boxes, resounding yes, and tapping into my Studio Ghibli vibes. The next game on my list is Zombie Cure Lab, and I was really excited for this and was underwhelmed once I got to play it. And so although I have removed this from my wishlist for now, I'm still going to kind of come back to it maybe once it's in full release mode, because there is definitely something here. The idea is that you're building out a zombie cure lab, and it works very similar to a lot of like Evil Genius style stuff, or Prison Architect in a way, where you're drawing out various different rooms that have functions, and then you're getting your workers to build them and then maintain stuff. But then when it comes to nighttime, all the zombies come out, and so you've got this strategy kind of building game going on to manage your resources, costs and all of that in the day. Nighttime, it turns into a tower defense game. The issue that I had was just how broken the zombie section of the game was, and so I ended up with like zombies getting stuck at my fence door, which then, because they were grabbing onto some of my staff, meant that my staff got stuck there. I found that the actual defences that I had erected up didn't work, and no one was arming them, and when they did, they didn't actually do anything. And so I like the concept of where this is going, but the demo was so broke on its output that it's put me off it for the time being. So I'll check back in on this maybe once it's released as a version 1.0. Like the idea and the concept, needs an awful lot of work to fix out the bugs and start to actually implement some of the ideas that it's got to really make me understand exactly how this game's going to play. Because I didn't feel like I got any resounding answers from it from the gameplay that I got in the demo. In a total change of pace, this next game is called Garden Inn. Not gardening, Garden Inn. And it's a sandbox open to your own devices and own timescales and own inventions, I guess, of being able to pick your various different vases, your different types of soils and your different seeds, and then plant in flowers and watch them grow over time. In the demo itself, it allowed you to speed forward time on the wall, and I don't know if that's a real concept that carries over for the game itself, but the idea is to constantly kind of check in once a day on your plants, give them a quick water and see how they grow, I guess, over time. The interesting thing about this is that it was quite zen and oddly relaxing, even if there were some control issues about where you could place your plants inside your digital house, I guess. But the concept itself was quite fine. I think where I start to tap out with this is that I felt like I'd already reached the entire conclusion of this game in the demo. And so if it's going to just offer more of the same, but just more variety of plants, or we was in just one room of our house and it was implying that you could unlock other rooms in the house, that you could store more plants in it, that's fine, but it's more of the same again. So what else can it offer in terms of variety? If it doesn't offer anything else, then I think Garden Inn is not for me and I'll probably remove it from my wish list. But if it does offer some alternatives or just spices up the gameplay a little bit, then I quite like the concept, and so long as it's reasonably priced, I'd probably pick it up. Totally different, but in still a garden theme, is Gacha Garden, and I found this game way more engaging and addictive than I had any intentions of it being. You have all of these different tiles laid out a little bit like a Zen garden, but there's these fire little creatures that dance around your garden, and whenever you click on them, they'll spew out some coins, which you can then deposit into the gacha box in the middle of your garden. That gacha box will then spew out a new random tile. And the idea is that you're constantly getting all of these new tiles spewing out everywhere, so you get a very randomised garden that you can then start building into however you want. Now, looking through Steam Workshops, and people have done some absolutely beautiful works of art where they've actually put things all into nice positions and nice arrangements, and it's all symmetrical and beautiful and all of that. I just wanted to play and see what on earth it was spitting out personally. So if it had tea lights and I was able to start building rivery lakes that could go round, great fun. But if I was building little huts and buildings everywhere, equally good fun. I wasn't really thinking about how I could make something nice and zen. Oddly satisfying, oddly engaging, and it just taps into that gacha, I'll just do one more because I just want to keep going. So yeah, I'm going to pick this up, and this was totally not on my radar, and I kind of downloaded this demo on a whim, and now I was hooked. So thumbs up from me for Gacha Garden. Very niche though. If you want to go even more niche though, the block fits that bill. The block isn't a game, it's a digital toy more than anything else, and it reminds me heavily of the game Townscaper, but even more condensed down. The idea is that inside this block that you've got on your screen, it's been divided up into loads and loads of different squares, and you constantly get given randomly generated squares that you can then move around. You can choose to bin that square if you want, but eventually you'll have to start placing stuff down because there's only a certain amount of blocks that come out in the demo, so it gave you only a certain choice of things that you can maneuver around. And then you just drop the blocks in, and then you make whatever it is that you want. Now, because of this RNG factor about what gets generated, the idea is to try and, I guess, promote creativity and just let you noodle around. Again, some people have made some very nice stuff in the Steam Workshops and pictures and uploading of all of this. I just mucked about with it for a little while and kind of went, oh, that's okay. My problem with the block, and the reason why I don't necessarily push it for a recommendation, is that Townscaper does this and does this way, way better. But but also gives you that movement of full camera movement around, and it's less blocky and more organic in the way how it pulls all of that stuff together as a digital toy. So if you love Townscaper, maybe check out the block. It could still scratch an itch for you. I think for most people though, Townscaper will absolutely reign supreme, especially because that is already cheap as chips. Now, I absolutely adore disaster movies, and I run a website called ilovedisastermovies.com to prove the point. So I had to download the demo for plain accident. And I came away from this demo thinking, God, that was a janky mess, but I oddly still enjoyed myself. So my recommendation on this one is going to be totally screwed, because if it's a disaster movie or anything about natural disasters or plane disasters or any kind of man-made disaster, I'm in there like a shot. And it's that concept that carried me through. The actual way how this game plays is janky as hell. So you see this plane crash take place, and then the game kind of segments up into two very distinct sections. Section 1 is looking around the actual wreckage itself. So you'll start putting down markers, you'll start taking photos, you'll start gathering evidence in a way that means that you can start trying to solve the mystery of how the plane crash happened. Once you've collected all the evidence and marked it out and put the tape round and all of that kind of stuff, you'll then move into the deduction phase, which is where all of the wreckage is laid out in a warehouse in front of you, and you start looking at witness testimonies and the photography element that you took earlier on, as well as records of plane maintenance, safety and all of that kind of stuff. Really interesting and insightful. It's just a shame that the controls are an absolute mess. The way how you walk around in everything is also a mess, and things just didn't trigger properly. So I got stuck in a room that I couldn't get out of because it was telling me to do something, but I was in the room and I needed to get out the room, but it had blocked the exit and said, no, you can't leave because you've not finished yet. And I was like, I have. You're telling me to do the next thing. Ah! And that happened repeatedly. I'd also run into issues where the game would crash when I was, funny enough, at the plane crash scene. And there's also incessant, terrible screen tearing and slowdown, as if the game can't handle what it's trying to do. And my PC is very high end, so it shouldn't be doing that at all. However, I still enjoyed the investigation element of it, so there's definitely a nugget of something here. But just beware, this game is rough as nails. So you're going to have to wrestle it to the ground in order to enjoy it. Keeping on a vehicular theme, Subrov Underwater Discoveries was an intriguing demo that whetted my appetite for more, even though the game felt quite overwhelming at times. You're going to be manoeuvring a sub-rover around undersea, under the water, looking at wreckages, seeing fish fly by, and trying to get underwater discoveries discovered, either for treasure or for historical purposes. The game has an awful lot going on all at once, and so what you're doing is kind of manning everything from a central managerial point. So you'll be switching camera angles from what's above the ground to maybe going on board with the rover once you get it under the water. You'll be kind of towing it and lowering it up and down from your ship's deck carefully. And then once you're in the water, you'll then need to kind of maneuver around and get your sub-rover into the right positions, take whatever specimens you need, all of that kind of stuff. Get it back in time again without damaging it, and then get it back on the ship, and then play around with the radar for wherever it is you need to go next. There's an awful lot that you can do, and switching on lights and back and forth and turning on different telemetry so that you understood what was going on was really in depth. And the tutorial did an okay job at putting this all together, but it just felt mysterious and mystical once you was under the water. And it gave me, and this is probably a very specific reference, again, going back to my love of disaster movies, I've got the extra special edition of Titanic. God, it's all coming out now, isn't it? And there's a whole documentary of James Cameron taking his sub-rover down under and going around and looking around the Titanic wreckage. And this game emulates some of that really, really nicely, admittedly, of you looking at it through a TV screen, even though you're manoeuvring it too. So, yeah, it's a really unique and interesting experience, and I can't wait to see what else the game does with it. But there has to be some proper juicy treasure on there somewhere, or some big discoveries to keep it fresh and interesting. So let's see what Subrov can offer. It definitely stays on my wish list though. Also staying on my wish list is Organs Please. Now this is a dark comedy, basically send up of evil government corporation simulator, I guess. I'll put it under business sim. You're basically manufacturing humans for meat and fuel purposes so that you can jet off to a new planet and save yourself and your followers. However, there's an element of papers, please to this, because you're judging various different followers or minions by their personality traits and whether or not they should go on the ship to help colonise your new planet, or whether they should just be sacrificed for fuel. It felt dark, but there was definitely a good management spin to everything going on as well, and you had to make sure that you kept yourself in favour, because there's very good chance of you being overthrown and thrown out for good meat too, with a political coup if you don't satisfy all the right people and keep all of the VIPs happy when they come to visit. Love the humour, love the idea, and love the art style, and the general kind of dark humour, winky dialogue of the way how everything's all set up. So absolutely stays on my wish list, and I can't wait to get my teeth into it when it releases. This next game on the list is called Flooded, and I found this really difficult. The idea and the concept behind it, though, is ingenious. So it's like a city building simulator, but the tides are constantly rising, so what you've got left to play with gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and you're always kind of going for an end game. So the idea with this is that where you're trying to build various different minerals to get reserves to then build out better buildings for yourselves to house all of your inhabitants and keep your city alive as the world's coming to an end, basically. If you're putting anything that's vaguely near the edge of the tide, the next go it's going to be underwater. And so what you're doing is, as you're watching all of your stuff building up and you're trying to sustain yourself, you're like, oh no, it's going to be going next term. So there's like a permanent impermanence with everything that's going on around you. I found that very difficult to manage. There's also a huge probable amount of RNG depending on where all the different resources are when you generate a map. But I really do like the concept. I just failed really early every single time, and I'm not sure if that was just me being terrible, probably in this case, or whether the game is purposefully going to be that rock hard. But yeah, like the concept, and I'd be interested to try out more. This next game is a real interesting hybrid, and it's called dotAGE. The idea with this is that it's a city builder, but it's as a turn-based roguelike. So it feels a little bit like a village builder crossed with a digital board game. Really interesting design. So the idea behind this is that you make all of your changes to your village and then a turn ends and the world progresses slightly. So that could be that some of your family that you've put into a home in one turn will have a baby the next turn, so long as you've given them the option to try and have a baby in that household at that time. It could be that all of the resource gets harvested for your next turn, so long as you've put a worker in that specific location. However, if you aren't utilising the buildings that you've built, they become derelict, and then you lose all of the progress that you had for that specific building at that time. The idea is that as you progress through turns, your story of your village becomes more and more dynamic and potentially more chaotic, because you've got various different other things building out over time. So it could be that your villagers are becoming fearful of what's going on around them because there's a giant cataclysm coming. It could be that they're getting sick because you haven't looked after their needs. It could be that some of the events going on were around a big heat wave or a cold spell, or it could be that someone's caught fire, or it could be that there's been earthquakes or a plague or a tornado, volcano. Or it could be that like taxes have decided to raise because there's inflation. There's hundreds of different events that they can be chosen from, all in a different way every time that you play. And so it keeps you on your toes. I went through this a couple of different times and was getting slightly different variations on a theme as I was going through things, so it did feel unique and different, whilst also feeling like both a city builder and a roguelike turn-based strategy game. Super odd, but it works. So yeah, I was impressed with dotAGE and I'll definitely be coming back for this, even if I sucked at it and my colonies kept dying very quickly. The next game on this list was recommended and submitted by my Scandinavian crew, so thank you very much for this one. I didn't know it existed. Catizens is a mixture of a city and colony building sim with The Sims, but with cats. So the idea with this is that you have cats that all have different classes. So you've got like one that would be like an agricultural one, one's like a doctor, one's a knight that can fight off enemies. And all of the cats have various different traits and personalities, like The Sims. And so some cats will work well with others, some have traits. So if you build houses and you've got a feral cat, it won't want to sleep inside. So you need to kind of leave it an outside space, for example. There are some that are sociable, some want to be on their own, some don't want to harvest fruit and vegetables, some will only want to pick rocks and stones. And so all of this kind of is a little bit of balancing act of making sure that you group your cats together in ways that make sense so that they can become sociable with each other and make a nice clan, whilst also thriving as a village. As you collect all your resources, be that food for keeping everyone happy and well fed and healthy, or resources for building out various different buildings for your town, the way how the demo was structured was that you'd constantly go to new locations and kind of it would show you a new collection of buildings to play with. But what I'm assuming the game becomes is that that will kind of expand out so that it feels more connected as one giant Catizens universe, I guess, because this felt quite bitty in the demo. The other thing that I would say, and the only real big negative of this, and I guess it might be just because of the stage of development it was in, is that there's lots of bitty things that it's stolen from lots of other games, and it needs to find its own personality beyond just being cats. And part of the frustration I had with all of this was that I only had one cat that could fight as a knight. And so whenever there was like a bull or a wolf or like a giant walrusy pig thing was coming down to warthog, was coming down to try and kill us all, everyone just stood there and got beat up until the knight would actually go over and try and kill the thing. So I just got a bit frustrated at the fact that sometimes it was causing so much damage and potentially killing some of my cats off because they all just stood there, and I thought, oh, come on, help yourselves, mate. You could just fight, but with like poor stats rather than the knight being the only one that could fight. It just seemed a bit odd. But yeah, interesting, joyful, very colourful. And looked like actually the building and skills tree of everything that you've got looked quite in depth. So I'm intrigued to see what more comes from Catizens. The penultimate game on this list is one of the most intriguing and exciting games that I discovered out of all of these, and it's called Roots of Pacha. It's a bit like Stardew Valley, which sounds like a terrible way to introduce you to something, but the idea is that you're part of this tribe that have moved away and started to re-root themselves under a ginormous tree because the spirits told them to. But it's very primitive. So you've got an entire tribe that have come with you. So they act very much like your neighbours in Stardew Valley. They're all talkable. You have relationships over time. You can trade, share objects. Some of them are romanceable. But a lot of them like go around an entire 24-hour cycle of what they do each day. But alongside that, you have your own story as well. So you are becoming of age as member of the tribe and going through your rite of passage. Alongside all of this, you have to cultivate the land through farming, so you've got that aspect of it. You have a flute, which means that you can sing and talk to the animals and befriend them, which I thought was quite cool. And I really like the concept of, because this tribe is trying to communicate with the spirits, the tribe's elders come up with ideas of what things that they could do. And the first idea you get in the demo is to build a sundial. And so you need to kind of build out some of the actual resources and give them to the person that's having the idea. But it feels like you're building a civilization and taking them along for a ride towards something grander whilst having this life sim as well. So yeah, really interesting and intriguing. The only kind of slight weirdness that I had with this was just getting used to the control schemes, because you have your inventory down at the bottom, but then you also have like a selection of tools that you would have, as well as a bag of all of your seeds. And I kept ending up in the wrong bit of the menu down at the bottom. But once I got used to that, I kind of was in the zone with it. And I found this game very engrossing. And this is... I try to not buy too many of these types of games because they're such a time sink. But this could be one that breaks me, and I'll dive in for it on release. The final game in this collection is a demo that has been out before, but I didn't get the chance to play it, and it's called Terra Nil. This could equally be called a puzzle game in many ways, but it's a relaxing strategy game that's all around nature and reverse city building. You start off with a totally desolate, barren landscape, and you put down some wind turbines to try and generate electricity, which allows you to then put down various different pumps to rejuvenate the world and turn it into a lush, beautiful, ecological paradise again. However, in doing so, that's only half the puzzle, and you have to do that by kind of making the best use of the space in whatever it is that you've got around you for that specific level. Once you've then done that though, there's a part of the game where you need to then set everything on fire and burn it down to the ground in ash again to make the soil totally full of life and energy and beans again, so that you can then regrow an ecosystem that's perfectly balanced and harmonized between 3 different types of ecosystems. So you've got like a water biome, a harvesty type biome of forest, and then there's one around like bees and stuff as well. So you can't kind of go too far in one direction than the other, because then it will become out of balance. It becomes really nuanced. Loads of it is around like placement of whatever it is that you do. But yeah, really satisfying, engrossing, and just generally took me by surprise at just how a cool idea this is. So yeah, Terra Nil absolutely will be a day one for me. Can't wait for it. So that's it from my Steam Next Fest Summer 2022 collection. I hope you found these videos informative. If you enjoyed this one, drop a comment down below of whatever games took your fancy, because I think there's quite a varied collection here today. And let me know if you'd like me to do this again next year, perhaps, because this is an awful lot of work to undertake, and I just want to make sure that it's worthwhile for people before I have another go at it. Take care and happy gaming. Higher Plane Games is part of the Higher Plane Network, a completely independent media outlet supported by people like you. The goal is to create the best possible content that cultivates a richer indie scene for games as well as music and entertainment. To find out more and to get involved, visit patreon.com/Higher Plane Network. Your support makes all the difference, and in return you'll gain access to bonus content and downloads. Thank you for watching.